Hey guys, imagine this. You've just finished a long day of whatever medieval nonsense passes for work. Maybe hauling hay, maybe blacksmithing, maybe just trying not to die of the plague, and the sun finally dipped behind the thatched rooftops. Your back hurts, your feet are caked in mud, and your soul, if you believe in that kind of thing, could really use a pint. There's only one place you want to be right now, the tavern. Now, the medieval tavern isn't exactly the cozy pub you might picture today, all warm firelight and shiny brass mugs. It's a little rougher around the edges. Think less rustic charm and more someone spilled beer on a rat, and now the rat lives here. But that's part of the appeal. It's loud, it smells like smoke and sweat and ale, and everyone, from the local farmer to the traveling merchant, gathers here when night falls. You push open the heavy wooden door, it creaks like it's been through 100 winters, and you immediately hit by a wave of sound. Laughter, shouting, a lute badly out of tune. There's a fire crackling in a stone hearth that's probably seen more spilled drinks than logs, and the air's thick with smoke. Your eyes sting for a second, but then you spot it. The long wooden table where everyone's crowded shoulder to shoulder, mugs slamming, dice rolling, someone already snoring in the corner. The tavern keeper, or sometimes his wife, runs the show. They're always busy pouring ale, serving stew, breaking up fights. A medieval tavern isn't some corporate franchise. It's one family's livelihood. The ale is brewed right out back, and if it's been sitting too long, well, you'll find out the hard way tomorrow morning. You grab a seat, if you're lucky, and nod to the person next to you. No one's overly polite here. Social rules loosen up after a few gulps of beer that's probably only You can smell roasted meat, or something pretending to be meat, simmering over the fire. The stew is mostly barley, onions, and a vague sense of hope. But after a long day, it tastes like heaven. Everyone here's got a story. The farmer complains about the Lord raising taxes again. A soldier brags about battles you're pretty sure he didn't actually fight in. A merchant's showing off a pouch of coins that he probably shouldn't be showing off in a room full of thieves. And in the back, there's a traveling minstrel, or someone pretending to be one, plucking at strings, and singing a song that might have been about love before the ale hit him. There's a reason taverns became the social heart of the medieval world. In an age before TikTok, Netflix, or even reliable hygiene, this was where people came to be human. They'd laugh, argue, flirt, gamble, sing, and occasionally throw each other through the door. You could find out all the local gossip here, who's marrying who's in debt, who's secretly been seeing the miller's daughter. In a time when news traveled slower than a snail with a limp, the tavern was where stories spread like wildfire. And it wasn't just peasants who stopped by. Travelers, pilgrims, knights, even monks sometimes, might find themselves sitting right beside the locals. After all, everyone needed a roof, a fire, and something to drink. Taverns were the great equalizer, or as equal as medieval society got. Sure, you might still be a serf, and the knight might still technically own your entire existence. But for a few hours under the same smoky ceiling, you both got to complain about how bad the ale tasted. The drinks themselves were an experience. Beer and ale were the big ones, but don't expect your craft IPAs or chilled lagers here. Medieval brewing was more about survival than taste. Water wasn't safe to drink half the time, so fermented stuff was safer. It might be cloudy, thick and lukewarm, but it wouldn't kill you probably. If you were lucky, the tavern had wine, though it was often watered down or sour. Cider and mead showed up in certain regions, sweet and sticky and strong enough to make you forget your own name after a few mugs. Then there was the food, and calling it food might be generous. You'd get whatever was cooking in the communal pot that day, usually a pottage, a stew of grains, vegetables, and maybe a scrap of meat, if someone was feeling generous. Bread was the staple, sometimes fresh, sometimes so hard you could use it as a weapon. The wealthy might get roasted fowl or sausages, but the average traveler was just happy it was warm and edible. You take a sip of your ale, and it's rough, bitter, a little smoky, maybe even gritty, but after a few gulps, it grows on you. The warmth hits your stomach, the noise fades into a cozy blur, and suddenly everything feels okay. The candlelight flickers on the walls, casting shadows that make everyone look a little softer, a little friendlier. Even the guy loudly burping in the corner feels like part of the charm. In the corner, a group of men play dice. The clatter of bones on wood is hypnotic. A woman, probably the innkeeper's daughter, carries a tray of mugs like a battlefield general, dodging hands that reach out too eagerly. Someone starts singing again, badly, but no one minds. Music in a tavern doesn't have to be good, it just has to exist. You notice something about this place. It's a little lawless, but it's alive. Outside, the world is all order and duty, feudal hierarchies, church sermons, curfews. But inside the tavern, life breathes differently. People forget their place. The blacksmith jokes with the priest, the shepherd arm wrestles, the tax collector, and everyone's just people. The ale doesn't care what your social rank is. If you stay long enough, you start to recognize the rhythm of it all. The laughter that peaks and fades, the clink of mugs, the sighs after a long story. There's comfort in the noise, in being part of something messy and human. The tavern is where loneliness goes to die, at least for a night. But it's not all warmth and song. Every so often, a shout rises. Someone owes someone else money. Someone insulted someone's mother. Chairs scrape, mugs spill, fists fly. The tavern keeper knows when to step in and when to let it burn itself out. A bit of fighting was almost expected. It was part of the night's entertainment. As long as no one died and the tables survived, it was a good evening. And when things finally calm down again, someone tells a story. Maybe about a ghost in the old monastery, or a knight who met the devil at a crossroads. People lean in, the fire pops, and even the rowdiest drinkers go quiet. These weren't just stories for fun. They were a way to pass down bits of belief, warning, and wonder. In the dim light of the tavern, the line between myth and truth got blurry fast. As the night stretches on, you feel the air grow thicker with smoke and heat. A few people start nodding off at the tables, faces lit orange by the fire. Someone's snoring in the corner, someone else still arguing about dice. The tavern keeper's wiping down the counter, eyes heavy but smiling. Another night survived, another few pennies earned. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, the last candles are burning low. The laughter has faded to murmurs, the songs to whispers. You finish your drink, set down your mug, and sit for a while in that strange peace that comes after chaos. For a moment, you understand why people came here night after night. It was ante just for the ale or the food. It was for this feeling of belonging, of being human in a world that was often cold and hard. You step outside, and the night air hits you like a wave of cold water. The stars are bright, the village quiet, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. The tavern door closes behind you with a heavy thud, the firelight vanishing with it. Tomorrow will be another long day of toil and trouble. The door shuts behind you, and the sudden quiet feels strange. After all that noise and laughter, the night feels alive in a different way. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. You take a deep breath, the kind that feels cold enough to bite, and your ears ring a little from the sudden drop in sound. You can still hear faint echoes of singing from inside, a muffled chorus of people too drunk to know the lyrics. The street is muddy, uneven, and mostly empty now. A few lanterns flicker weakly in windows, their glow soft and golden. The moon hangs low, pale and watchful, shining on puddles that mirror the thatched roofs and crooked chimneys. Somewhere down the road, you hear the clop of a horse's hooves, someone heading home late, or maybe a guard making rounds, though guards in medieval towns weren't exactly eager night workers. Most of them preferred to keep warm indoors. A man stumbles past you, humming, half a loaf of bread tucked into his shirt like treasure. His boots squish in the mud. He mutters something about dice being cursed, then laughs to himself. You smile, because somehow he's the perfect symbol of a medieval night, tipsy, tired, and oddly content. You start walking, your boots sinking slightly with every step. The tavern fades behind you, its window glow getting smaller until it's just another spark in the dark. The sounds of the village are soft, a door creaking, a cow shifting in its pen, a dog whining for scraps. Life doesn't really stop, even when the sun's gone. If you were in a larger town, the streets wouldn't be quite this quiet. In medieval cities, nighttime could be a whole different world. After dark, the respectable folk went home, locked their doors, and prayed. But others, thieves, lovers, drunks, wanderers, they came alive. Taverns, inns, and alehouses were the heartbeat of that hidden world. If you followed the echo of a lute down a back alley, you might find a place even rougher than the one you just left, a smoky den of dice games, stolen goods, and whispered plans. But tonight, you're still a little buzzed. and you're not looking for trouble. You're just walking off the ale, breathing in the cold air, and maybe wondering what the world looks like beyond this sleepy little village. The stars above you are sharp, ancient, the same stars that kings and peasants have stared at for centuries. You realize, for all the noise and dirt and hardship, this life has a rhythm, and you're part of it now. You pass by a small stable, the kind that smells of hay, leather, and something less pleasant. A horse shifts in its stall, snorts softly, and looks at you like it's seen this routine 1,000 times. Drunk humans, stumbling home, mumbling songs. You pat its neck, mutter an apology for existing, and move on. Further ahead, there's another tavern, smaller, dimmer, and clearly less respectable. You can hear laughter spilling out of it, but this one doesn't sound merry. It's sharp, loud, and there's a crash followed by angry shouting. You decide to give it a wide berth. Medieval taverns had personalities, and not all of them were friendly. Some were dens of thieves, run by owners who made their money selling watered-down ale and looking the other way while pickpockets worked the crowd. Yours, by comparison, was a decent place. Honest drunks, fair prices, minimal knife fights. The fact that you left with all your coins and most of your dignity counts as a successful evening. The night grows colder as you make your way uphill, toward the edge of the village. There's a faint mist creeping over the fields, silver under the moonlight. You can see the dark outlines of cottages, a mill by the stream, and beyond that, the black silhouette of the forest. You hear an owl calling from somewhere deep inside the trees, slow, haunting. For a second, you think about how terrifying it must be to walk through those woods at night. In the Middle Ages, darkness wasn't just darkness, it was a presence, something alive with fears and whispers. People didn't have street lamps or flashlights. The night was something wild and unknowable. You didn't wander far after sunset unless you had to. Wolves, bandits, spirits, take your pick. There were stories of travelers vanishing, of strange lights flickering among the trees. Every village had its own version of a ghost story, usually involving someone who didn't listen to their grandmother and went wandering after curfew. But still, the night had its beauty. You can hear the quiet trickle of a stream nearby, reflecting the moonlight like a silver thread. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then settles again. The smell of wood smoke hangs in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of baked bread from someone's oven that hasn't quite gone out. The world feels still, like it's holding its breath. You stop by a low stone wall and sit for a moment. The cold seeps through your clothes, but it feels good, grounding. You can almost hear the faint echo of laughter still coming from the tavern behind you. Maybe inside, someone's telling a story about a knight who fell in love with a witch, or a fisherman who caught a mermaid, or a fool who drank too much and tried to wrestle a goose. The medieval mind lived in that space between real and unreal, a world of faith, myth, and mud. You look up at the sky. In a world without light pollution, the stars are blinding. There's the Milky Way, stretching like spilled flour across black velvet. For a second, you wonder how many people across centuries have stood exactly like this, a little drunk, a little lost, staring up at the same sky. Maybe that's the one thing about humanity that never changes, our habit of looking up, even when we don't know what we're looking for. Eventually, the cold gets to you. You pull your cloak tighter and start heading back down the road, toward your lodging. Maybe it's the inn next to the tavern, or maybe you're crashing in the hayloft like half the population did back then. The door creaks open, and a rush of warm air hits your face again, the comforting smell of straw, smoke, and stew that's been reheated one too many times. Inside, a few travelers are still awake. One's mending a torn cloak by candlelight, another's hunched over a small wooden cup, lost in thought. You nod politely as you pass. No one talks much at this hour. The noise of the tavern has given way to a heavy, companionable silence. You find a spot near the hearth, not too close, and stretch out on a thin blanket that feels like woven sandpaper. You stare at the fire for a while. It pops and hisses, throwing lazy sparks. Someone coughs softly. Someone turns in their sleep. You close your eyes, and the scenes of the night drift through your head. The laughter, the songs, the smell of ale, the feeling of being surrounded by strangers who didn't feel like strangers. For a world so often described as dark and brutal, moments like this remind you it was also warm, human, and alive. Sleep comes slow, but steady. Your mind hums with the rhythm of the tavern, mugs clinking, laughter echoing, dice rolling. You can almost still feel the heat of the fire. Hear the muttered prayers of the innkeeper as he snuffs the last candle. The medieval night wraps around you like a heavy cloak, and somewhere outside, the first faint light of dawn begins to push at the edge of the world. In a few hours, the tavern will wake again. The floor will be swept poorly. The air will fill once more with chatter, smoke, and the smell of bread. The regulars will return, bleary-eyed and ready to repeat the ritual. And maybe you'll go back too, because no matter how rough the ale, how loud the crowd, or how sticky the tables, there's something in that place that calls you back. It's not the beer or the stew, it's the humanity. The sound of laughter breaking through hardship, the flicker of a candle that refuses to go out, the way people, in every century, find each other in the dark and decide to sit close, share a drink, and be alive together for a while. So you roll over, the fire crackling low, and drift into sleep. Outside, the roosters haven't started yet, the village is quiet, and the tavern, that chaotic, smoky, beautiful mess, rests just like you do. Tomorrow will bring noise and work, and probably another hangover. But for now, there's only the stillness of the medieval night, and the memory of laughter that carries through it. But for tonight, you've lived like a medieval soul at peace, ale in hand, surrounded by laughter and life. You wake up to the sound of something scraping against the floor. For a moment, you're not entirely sure where you are. The air smells like old wood smoke and spilled ale. Then you hear someone yawning nearby, and it all comes back. The tavern, the laughter, the dice, and the mug that you probably shouldn't have refilled that last time. Your head feels like someone used it as a drum. The fire has burned down to ash, and faint morning light leaks through the shutters, turning everything a dusty gold. A rooster outside has decided that everyone needs to know it's alive, and it's not taking breaks between announcements. You groan, roll onto your side, and instantly regret moving. The tavern is quieter now, but not peaceful. It's the kind of quiet, filled with half asleep, grumbling, and the occasional clatter of someone cleaning up. You blink a few times until your eyes adjust, and you see the tavern keeper's wife sweeping the floor with a bundle of straw tied together with twine. She looks like she's been awake for hours, which, to be fair, she probably has. A few of last night's drinkers are still here. One man sprawled under a table, snoring into a puddle of his own drool. Another's sitting upright, staring at nothing, holding an empty cup like it personally betrayed him. There's a couple of travelers at the far end whispering softly, still wrapped in their cloaks. And you, somewhere in the middle, blinking at the sunlight like it's a new invention. The tavern smells intense. Smoke, sweat, ale, and just a hint of something you don't want to identify. You watch as the tavern keeper starts rearranging benches, muttering under his breath about devils who can't hold their drink. He's got that permanent look of someone who's seen every kind of foolishness humanity has to offer and no longer finds any of it surprising. Eventually, he glances your way. "You alive then?" He grunts. You nod slowly. Mostly, he chuckles. "Then you're luckier than half the lads who come through here." He pushes a wooden mug toward you. "Drink, it'll help." You take it, praying it's not more ale. Thankfully, it's water probably drawn from a nearby well. It tastes faintly of iron and dust, but right now, it might as well be ambrosia. You sip carefully, letting your head stop spinning. Breakfast, if you can call it that, comes soon after. The tavern keeper's wife ladles out something from a large pot, a thin porridge made from barley and milk, with a few sad raisins floating on top. It's warm, bland, and perfect. You eat slowly, savoring the feeling of being alive. The tavern fills gradually as people wake up. A merchant complains about a lost coin purse. A minstrel tunes his lute with a pained expression, probably regretting his own performance from last night. The innkeeper's dog, a tired old hound with one ear missing, wanders between the tables, sniffing for scraps and affection. Then come the morning sounds from outside, wheels creaking, chickens clucking, voices rising. The world is waking up, and with it comes the familiar rhythm of the medieval day. You step outside for a moment to stretch. The air is cold, crisp, and smells faintly of smoke and damp earth. The street that was dark and mysterious last night now looks ordinary, almost friendly. Children run past chasing a stick. A woman carries a basket of bread, and someone's already hammering something on an anvil down the lane. The village feels alive again, simple, noisy, human. A few locals greet you with nods or curious glances. Travelers stand out, especially if you're not covered in mud in quite the same way they are. A man driving a cart full of cabbages pauses to let a chicken cross the road, muttering something about stupid birds and their stupid timing. You can't help but laugh a little. Back inside, the tavern keeper is setting up for the new day. The tables have been wiped, sort of. Fresh ale is being poured into barrels, and bread's being cut into thick, uneven chunks. A few regulars are already back, because apparently hangovers are just invitations to start again. One of them winks at you. Best cure for a sore head, he says, is more ale. You politely decline. Taverns weren't just drinking spots, they were community centers. Messages got passed here, deals were made, and travelers shared news from faraway towns. The medieval post system wasn't exactly reliable, so gossip was the next best thing. You hear one man talking about a fair in the next village. They say the bishop himself's coming, and another arguing that he saw a comet last night, which everyone else insists was just a drunk firefly. The conversation flows around you like a lazy river of nonsense, comforting in its way. The minstrel starts strumming his lute again, softly this time. The tune is slow and wistful. Something about a sailor who promised to return and didn't. You can tell it's one of those songs everyone knows, because a few people hum along without thinking. Music like that filled taverns all across medieval Europe. Simple, repetitive, easy to remember, and somehow always about love, or loss, or both. As you watch, the tavern keeper's daughter comes by to collect empty bowls. She's quick and practiced, balancing 3 at once. When someone jokes about her finding a husband soon, she snorts. "A husband won't sweep the floors for me," she says, and keeps moving. You can tell she's heard that joke 1,000 times before. There's a kind of rhythm to the morning after the quiet hum of recovery. The night's chaos gives way to the day's small labors. Someone's sweeping, someone's cooking, someone's arguing about who actually won at dice. The tavern isn't just a place to escape life, it's a place that reflects it. Messy, noisy, but familiar. You start to notice details you missed last night. The wooden beams overhead are carved with small symbols, crosses, flowers, maybe even initials. A charm hangs near the door, a little bundle of herbs meant to keep away evil spirits or bad luck. There's a faded tapestry on the wall showing a knight hunting a boar, though the boar looks suspiciously like a fat dog. The tavern's old, older than most of the people in it, and every mark, every scar on the wood tells a story. By midday, the place is fully alive again. A group of laborers comes in for a quick meal before heading back to work. They sit together, laughing, eating, wiping their mouths with the backs of their hands. Their voices are rough, their faces weathered, but their laughter is light. Life might be hard, but they still find reasons to smile between shovels and sweat. Outside, you can hear the market starting up, the distant calls of traders, the bleating of goats, the chatter of women bartering for vegetables. The tavern's door keeps swinging open and shut as people come and go. The innkeeper moves like a conductor, keeping the whole operation running on instinct and muscle memory. A man at the next table catches your eye. He's got the look of someone who travels a lot, a cloak worn thin, boots caked in dust, a faint scar across his cheek. "First time through here?" He asks. You nod. He grins. "Then you chose a good place. They don't water the ale, and they don't stab you unless you deserve it." You laugh, unsure how serious he is, but he seems friendly enough. He tells you stories between bites of bread, about towns where the taverns have floors made of dirt, or others so fancy that you can't walk in without shoes made of something that used to be alive. Every traveler measures the world by its taverns, it seems. By now, your headache's faded, and the world feels soft around the edges. The light through the shutters dances with the smoke, turning everything a warm golden haze. You realize that if you lived here, this place, this creaky, loud, wonderful mess, would be your second home. Someone brings out a fresh loaf of bread, still steaming from the oven. The crust crackles as it's broken open, and the smell fills the room, simple, perfect. The kind of smell that makes everyone stop talking for a moment, just to breathe it in. You tear off a piece and let it melt in your mouth. No spices, no sugar, no fancy touches, just flour, salt, and fire. But in that moment, it's better than anything else you can imagine. Maybe that's what makes the medieval tavern special, not the chaos or the ale or the fights, but the rare quiet moments of contentment that happen between them. Outside, bells start to ring, calling people to prayer, or maybe just marking the hour. The tavern keeper wipes his hands on his apron, nods toward the door, and says, "Time waits for no one, not even drunks." You smile, finish your bread, and stand to leave. The light outside is bright now, washing the world in color. Children shout, dogs chase each other, and smoke curls lazily from chimneys. You glance back once before stepping out. Inside, the tavern hums like a living thing. Laughter, footsteps, the scrape of chairs, the endless heartbeat of ordinary life. You take one last breath of the smoky air and step into the day. Whatever happens next, work, travel, maybe even another night of dice and stories, you know where you'll end up again when the sun sets. Because in a world that's harsh, uncertain, and endlessly tiring, there's always a place waiting with a fire, a cup, and a story. A medieval tavern where humanity, in all its noisy imperfection, gathers to remember that even in the darkest centuries, life was still full of laughter, warmth, and the small, sacred joy of being alive together. The air outside feels fresher now, as if the night's chaos has been scrubbed away by sunlight and smoke. You stretch, listening to the creak of your joints and the faint clatter of a blacksmith's hammer somewhere down the road. The village has transformed overnight. What was once a dim maze of shadows and laughter is now a mosaic of sound and motion. The street is narrow and uneven, the ground a mix of packed earth and straw. Chickens dart between your feet as if they own the place, and they probably do. A cart rolls past, pulled by a sleepy-looking donkey who seems deeply unimpressed with the concept of work. Its owner walks beside it, muttering encouragements that sound more like threats. To your left, a woman sits outside her house spinning wool, her hands moving so fast it's hypnotic. She hums softly to herself, pausing only to scold a child trying to steal one of her apples. To your right, a cooper, a barrel maker, is pounding metal hoops into place, the rhythm of his work echoing through the lane. Each clang feels like the heartbeat of the town. You wander a bit, soaking it all in. The smells hit you next: smoke, bread, baking somewhere close, wet hay, and something that might be fish but might also be a mistake. Medieval towns didn't believe in subtlety when it came to scent. It's a full sensory experience, whether you want it or not. Further along, you spot a group of men loading sacks onto a wagon. Grain, maybe. Trade is the bloodline of places like this. Taverns weren't just for drinking. They were waypoints in the vast web of travel and commerce. Every merchant, pilgrim, and messenger passing through meant new stories, new news, and maybe even a few coins spent on ale. You can still hear faint laughter drifting from the tavern behind you, but now the world's noise is taking over. Children playing tag, someone calling for their missing goat, the gentle clink of coins in the marketplace up ahead. When you reach the town square, it's alive with movement. A small crowd gathers around a cart where a man in a faded red cloak is shouting about miracle tonics. Good for the stomach, good for the soul, clears the mind, cures the cough, restores lost love, he declares. His bottle looks suspiciously like it contains water tinted with wine. A few people watch, skeptical but curious. You catch the eye of an older woman shaking her head. "Same nonsense every week," she mutters. "Cures everything but common sense." You smile, moving on. At another stall, a baker is pulling loaves from a stone oven, their crusts brown and cracked just right. The smell is almost magnetic. She's shouting over the crowd. Hot bread, still warm. As coins clink and hands reach out, you buy a small piece, still steaming, and it's perfect crusty outside, soft inside, with that faint sweetness of barley. Nearby, a potter displays jugs and cups in uneven rows, the glaze catching the sunlight in muted blues and greens. Every piece has some small imperfection, a crooked lip here, a thumbprint there, but that's part of their charm. You can almost imagine one of these mugs ending up in the tavern you just left, filled with ale or soup, or maybe even someone's tears after losing a bet. The market isn't large, but it's busy. A few monks in brown robes move through the crowd, collecting donations for their abbey. Their sandals slap softly against the dirt, and they smell faintly of herbs and candle wax. One of them pauses to bless a child, placing a gentle hand on her head before disappearing back into the sea of people. A jester or something close to one appears out of nowhere, juggling apples and occasionally dropping one. He wears a faded motley tunic, the colors long since surrendered to time and stains. Children gather around him, giggling as he pretends to lose his balance. When one apple finally hits the ground and rolls away, a chicken steals it, and the crowd bursts into laughter. Everywhere you look, Life hums with energy. People argue about prices, laugh over gossip, exchange news, and always, in the distance, the tavern remains the heartbeat of it all. You stop near a fountain that's really more of a trough. A few people fill buckets, while others just sit on its edge, chatting. A man tells a story about a knight who once drank too much and tried to joust the windmill. Everyone laughs, even though no one's sure if it's true. But that's how medieval towns worked. Truth and entertainment were often the same thing. The rhythm of the day is simple. Work, talk, trade, repeat. Yet beneath it all, there's something warm, a shared understanding that life is hard. But it's easier when you face it together. The tavern keeper, the baker, the potter, even the traveling peddler, all parts of the same fragile, chaotic system. You notice a sign nailed to a post, an announcement written in thick black ink. The letters are uneven, clearly done by someone who could write, but didn't particularly enjoy it. It declares that the lord of the manor will be holding court in 2 days. Anyone with grievances or disputes may come forward. You imagine the arguments that'll follow: boundary fights, missing chickens, maybe even a marriage disagreement. Justice in the Middle Ages was often just theatre with a sword. As you walk further, you see the road stretching out of town, a dusty path lined with hedges and wildflowers, leading who knows where. A few travelers are already on it, a man leading a mule, a woman carrying a bundle of cloth, a group of young men laughing as they start their journey. The road was both freedom and danger back then, full of opportunity and risk in equal measure. You take a few steps toward it, then pause. There's something about the tavern calling you back, not physically, but in spirit. You realize it's not just a place to drink, it's a place to belong. Every traveler needs a point on the map that feels like home, even if it's only for a night. You sit for a while on a stone by the road, watching the town breathe. The bells ring again, somewhere near the church this time. A faint breeze carries the sound of laughter from the marketplace. For a moment, everything feels still, as if the whole medieval world has paused just to exist. The tavern isn't far, but the day has stretched wide between then and now. You think about returning later, maybe for supper, maybe just for company. The tavern keeper will have new stories, new faces will appear, and the same old songs will play again. Because that's the magic of places like that. No matter how the world outside changes, the tavern stays the same, anchored in routine and memory. You stand up, dust off your tunic, and start walking again. The road crunches softly beneath your boots, and the sun's starting to tilt westward. A cart passes by, the driver offering you a nod. Heading far? He asks. Just walking, you reply. He grins. Aren't we all? He moves on, his cart rattling into the distance. You keep walking, thinking about everything you've seen today, the laughter, the work, the noise, the life. The medieval world isn't clean or quiet or easy, but it's endlessly human. Every day begins with the same light and ends with the same darkness. And in between, people find meaning in the simplest things: bread, song, company. As the sun lowers, you find yourself drifting back toward the tavern almost by instinct. The smell of smoke and roasting meat reaches you before you even see the building. Someone's laughing again, that familiar, comforting sound that means warmth and stories are waiting. The door creaks open as you approach, and the glow of firelight spills out into the twilight. For a moment, you stand there, caught between day and night, the road and the hearth, the world outside and the little universe within. Then you step back inside. The moment you step inside, it's like crossing into another world. The dim evening light from outside gives way to the flicker of fire and the murmur of voices. The tavern, quiet and weary that morning, is now waking up again, stretching, yawning, and filling itself with life. The air is thicker, warmer. Smoke curls lazily from the hearth, where a pot of something savory bubbles away. A few candles drip wax onto uneven tables, their flames trembling every time someone opens the door. You can smell roasted meat, old ale, sweat, and the faint sweetness of honey mead. It's not exactly pleasant, but it's comforting in its own strange, human way. People are already gathering again. Farmers with dirt still on their hands, traders from the market, a couple of travelers who look like they've spent the whole day walking under the sun. Even the jester from earlier is here, though now he's nursing a mug instead of juggling apples. The tavern keeper nods at you as you enter, that same half smile under his moustache. Back again, eh? You shrug. Seemed quieter than the road. He laughs. Ain't that always the way? He wipes his hands on his apron, then gestures toward a seat near the fire. Sit, you look like you've earned it. You take the seat, and the bench creaks beneath you, wood softened by years of stories, spilled drinks and laughter. The fire crackles, throwing sparks that dance up the chimney. For a moment, you just sit and watch the flames twist and fold around the logs. The tavern keeper's wife appears with a plate, thick slices of bread, a wedge of cheese, and something that might once have been a chicken but has since surrendered to stew. Eat before the noise starts, she says, setting it down. You thank her, and she gives a faint smile before disappearing back toward the kitchen. You eat slowly, listening. The voices around you blend into a pleasant hum. Someone's laughing too loud in the corner. A group of young men are arm wrestling at the far end of the room. An old man leans close to his companion, telling a story so quietly you can only catch a few words. Witch, forest, midnight. You're not sure if it's a warning or just entertainment. Then the minstrel returns, the same one from that morning, only now his eyes are clearer, and his lute has been returned. He strums a few notes, bright and soft, and the noise in the room begins to fade. People turn their heads. The young men stop their contest, and even the tavern keeper pauses mid-pour. The minstrel smiles faintly, then begins to sing. His voice isn't perfect, but it's alive. It tells a story about a man who fell in love with the sea and promised to return, but the waves took him instead. The melody is simple, but it carries something heavy, something ancient. When he finishes, the room stays quiet for a heartbeat, and then someone claps softly, followed by others. Another, someone shouts. The minstrel grins. All right then, a happier one, perhaps. He plucks a faster tune, something about a fox outsmarting a farmer, and just like that, the tavern's mood changes again. Laughter rises, mugs are lifted, feet tap against the floor. The walls seem to breathe with it. You realize how quickly this world shifts. Sorrow, joy, exhaustion, laughter, all mixing together like the smoke in the air. That's the charm of the tavern. It's where everyone's stories meet for a while before scattering again. As the evening deepens, the door keeps swinging open, letting in bursts of cold air and new faces. A soldier steps in, his armor dull with travel dust. A nun follows soon after, surprising everyone until she heads straight to the tavern keeper and asks for a bowl of soup and no nonsense. Even she laughs when someone jokes that holiness doesn't fill the stomach. The soldier sits nearby, loosening his belt and sighing deeply. You catch snippets of his talk. He's come from a nearby fortress, he says, and the road's crawling with trouble. Bandits, maybe deserters. Hard to tell the difference these days. Someone murmurs a prayer, and then the talk shifts, because bad news is best buried under ale. The evening goes on. The noise builds. Dice clatter across tabletops. Someone slams a mug down too hard, spilling ale that quickly spreads like a tiny river. The tavern keeper sighs and tosses a rag to a boy sweeping the floor. Clean it before it breeds. Two men start arguing over a card game, or whatever passes for one, since the cards are uneven and half drawn by hand. Voices rise, chairs scrape. For a second, you think it might come to blows, but the tavern keeper steps in, solid as a wall. You want to fight? Do it outside. The chickens could use a laugh. The men grumble but sit back down. There's always a thin line in taverns between warmth and chaos, between fellowship and foolishness. It's what makes them alive. At your table, the soldier has loosened up, telling stories of faraway places, castles on cliffs, frozen rivers, battles fought for reasons no one remembers. He gestures wildly, nearly knocking his cup over, and you can't help but smile. His tales might be exaggerated, but who's going to argue? The tavern is made for stories, not truths. The minstrel's taken a break, and now the jester's entertaining a small crowd by pretending to talk to the tavern's hound, asking it deep questions about the meaning of life. The dog just stares at him, unimpressed. Everyone laughs anyway. Then, as if by instinct, someone begins a drinking song. The chorus is loud, clumsy, and repeated far too many times, but it fills the space perfectly. You join in without even meaning to. The melody is simple, the words a little rude, and the laughter unstoppable. Outside, night has fallen completely. The shutters are closed, and the wind rattles them occasionally. Inside, the fire burns brighter, and time starts to lose meaning. You're not sure how long you've been here. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. The tavern keeper refills your cup without asking, and you raise it in thanks. Around you, life unfolds in tiny, beautiful details. A couple sitting close, whispering, an old man asleep on his folded arms, the tavern keeper's wife, laughing softly as she shoves her husband out of her way. There's comfort in the repetition. Every night different, yet somehow exactly the same. Faces change, stories change, but the rhythm remains. Talk, drink, laugh, rest. The soldier's eyes droop, and he leans back with a sigh. If I could choose, he mutters, I'd rather die here than out there. Someone pats his shoulder. Then you better drink faster. Laughter again. The kind that comes from people who've seen too much and still manage to smile. The minstrel returns for one last song, softer this time, something gentle enough to settle the crowd. The melody moves through the room like smoke, touching every face, every shadow. The fire cracks. Someone hums along. You close your eyes and let it carry you for a while. When you open them again, the tavern feels smaller, quieter. Some have left. Others have simply fallen asleep where they sit. The soldier snores. The jester has disappeared. The tavern keeper leans against the counter, staring into the embers. You finished your drink, feeling the slow warmth of it spreading through you. Outside, the wind sighs against the walls. The world feels far away. Wars, hunger, lords, taxes, all beyond these walls. In here, there's only humanity, raw and imperfect and endlessly alive. You stand, stretch, and nod toward the tavern keeper. He nods back, no words needed. You make your way to the door, pushing it open just enough to feel the cold night air. The stars are out, faint but steady, scattered like dust across the sky. Behind you, the tavern's firelight flickers, painting the room gold in shadow. Voices murmur softly, fading into sleep. You step outside, pulling your cloak tighter. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, a bell rings. Midnight. You look back one last time. The tavern stands there, solid and glowing, a small beacon in a world of dark roads. Tomorrow it'll wake again, the same way it always does. New faces, new stories, the same fire. You start walking down the lane, boots crunching on the frost, and for a moment, it feels like time itself has slowed, holding you there, halfway between dream and memory, listening to the echo of laughter behind the tavern's walls. The next night, the tavern is alive again, louder, somehow, than before. The crowd seems to have multiplied, and the mix of people feels even stranger. Merchants fresh from the road are swapping lies with local farmers, while a group of traveling actors are loudly complaining about how no one in this village understands true art. The innkeeper pretends not to hear, because their coins spend just fine either way. Tonight, the air carries the smell of something spiced, maybe cinnamon or nutmeg, brought by traders from faraway lands. You realize that this tavern, like many in the Middle Ages, is more than a place for ale and gossip. It's a crossroads. Every traveler brings a bit of the world with them, stories, songs, rumors, and smells that drift in like smoke and settle into the wood. At one table, a group of mercenaries brag about the battles they fought. None of their stories match, but no one cares. The point isn't truth, it's entertainment. A few locals listen in, eyes wide, picturing faraway wars they'll never see. Someone laughs too hard, someone else spits ale on the floor, and the noise folds back into the rhythm of the room. You can't help but notice the walls blackened by years of smoke, scratched with carved initials, hearts, and a few crude drawings. The floor is uneven, and every time someone stomps, dust falls from the beams above. Still, this place feels alive, more alive than most castles or courts. Here, the rules are different. The Lord's tax collector might drink next to a beggar, and for one night, both are just men with mugs. A fiddler starts up again, playing something fast and wild. The crowd claps, offbeat but enthusiastic. The rhythm builds, and suddenly, a few people get up to dance. There's no grace to it, just raw joy. A farmer twirls his wife. A traveling woman stomps her boots in time with the beat. Someone yells for more ale. Someone else yells that they've had enough. No one listens to either. And in the corner, as always, sit the quiet ones. The scribe with ink-stained fingers, scribbling something on a scrap of parchment. Maybe he's recording gossip, or maybe he's just sketching the chaos for later. Beside him, a young monk looks both fascinated and horrified by what he's seeing. He's probably on an errand for his abbey, and thought he'd rest here. A mistake that will become a very interesting confession later. Then there's the cook's boy, slipping through the crowd with a tray of roasted meat. He's quick and sharp-edged, ducking under arms and dodging slaps. Every plate he carries disappears in seconds. Food here isn't refined, it's hearty and greasy, and meant to soak up the drink. Meat pies, thick stews, bread so coarse it could double as a weapon. But when you're half drunk, it's the best food you've ever tasted. At another table, the innkeeper negotiates with a group of men about a delivery of wine. It's serious business. Taverns live and die by their supply. If the next barrel comes in sour, that's a week of angry customers and lost coin. But for now, all seems well. The innkeeper laughs, seals the deal with a clap on the back, and shuffles off to fill more mugs. You hear snippets of conversation everywhere. A farmer swears his cow can talk. A traveler claims he saw a dragon. A washerwoman insists that last week the miller's wife ran away with a minstrel. Everyone gasps, not because they believe it, but because it's deliciously possible. In a world where faith and superstition live side by side, you never really know what to believe. As the night deepens, the tavern feels timeless. The candles burn low, the music softens, and voices blend into a warm hum. You could close your eyes and imagine you're in any year, any century. The same laughter, the same arguments, the same song. The faces change, the clothes shift, but the rhythm of human company, the need to gather, to drink, to tell stories, stays exactly the same. Then the door opens again, and cold night air rushes in. Everyone turns. A man in travel-stained clothes enters, cloak heavy with rain, eyes alert. He looks around, searching, then spots someone and crosses the room. You catch only a few words, something about a missing shipment, a dangerous road, a toll that wasn't paid. The mood tightens for a moment. A few men glance toward the door, as if expecting soldiers. But just as quickly, the tension melts back into laughter. That's the strange magic of the medieval tavern. It swallows everything. Trouble, joy, fear, all drowned together in ale and noise. The world outside might be dangerous, but in here, the walls hold it back, at least for tonight. Near the hearth, the old storyteller clears his throat again. His voice rises over the hum, rough but commanding. He begins a tale about a ghost that haunts the crossroads, a spirit that punishes liars and cheats. The room grows quiet, eyes fixed on him. Even the drunkest men fall still, their mugs forgotten for a moment. When he finishes, the room stays silent just long enough to feel the chill of the story. Then someone bursts out laughing, breaks the spell, and the noise returns. A few people cross themselves. Others order another round. You realize then that the tavern isn't just a place to drink, it's a heartbeat, a living, breathing piece of the community. Everything important passes through here eventually. News, rumors, love, grief, all carried by word of mouth and a bit of ale. The candles flicker lower now. Someone snores at a table. Someone else is quietly singing a lullaby to themselves. The innkeeper moves through the room like a shadow, gathering empty mugs, kicking stray dogs away from the hearth. Outside, the wind rises, and the tavern shutters creak in rhythm. Tomorrow morning, it will all happen again. Different faces, same laughter. The world will move on. But tonight, in this smoky, glowing room, time stands still, just long enough for one more story, one more sip, and one more song before sleep claims everyone. Morning sneaks into the tavern like a thief, quiet, cold, and unwanted. The first light slides through the cracks in the shutters, catching the drifting dust and half-empty mugs left behind. The air is thick with the ghosts of the night before. Spilled ale, smoke, roasted meat, and sweat. The laughter that filled the room just hours ago has faded into low snores, coughs, and the occasional muttered dream. The innkeeper's wife is already up, moving through the wreckage like someone used to this chaos. Her apron is already stained, and she's muttering under her breath as she collects tankards, wipes tables, and kicks awake anyone sleeping where they shouldn't be. A farmer blinks in confusion as he finds himself under a bench, while a merchant is still holding his mug, as if it's a priceless relic. No one looks proud of themselves, but no one looks truly sorry either. The hearth, once alive with warmth, is now nothing but grey ash and a few glowing coals. The innkeeper crouches beside it, pokes the embers, and throws on some kindling. It takes a few tries before the first flames wake up, stretching lazily before beginning to crackle again. Soon the smell of smoke is joined by something far more hopeful: bread toasting, onions frying, and the first pot of weak ale warming for breakfast. Medieval tavern mornings were not glamorous. They were practical, heavy, and often a little painful. For travelers, this was the moment to gather what was left of their dignity, check their purse, and hope they hadn't promised anyone a duel or a marriage proposal during the night. For locals, it was the slow return to normal life. Farms, fields, mills, and workshops waiting beyond the door. You can hear the low rumble of morning voices, rough, cracked, and slow. The early risers sit hunched over bowls of pottage, that thin mix of oats, onions, and anything else that might have survived the night before. Someone asks for eggs. Someone else grunts that chickens don't lay themselves. The cook doesn't even answer. She just slides another loaf toward the table and wipes her hands on her apron. There's a rhythm to it all. The scrape of spoons, the creak of chairs, the groan of tired men standing up. In one corner, a minstrel quietly tunes his instrument, eyes red and head heavy, preparing to earn another day's meal with the same songs he sang last night. His fingers move slowly, as if they too have a hangover. The door opens, letting in a blast of morning chill and the sound of church bells somewhere down the road. A few heads lift, not in piety, but in mild resentment that the bells are so loud. It's Sunday, or maybe a saint's day. Either way, someone mutters that the priest should try a morning after a night like this before he dares ring anything. Laughter stirs weakly across the room. A couple of travelers argue quietly over their bill. The innkeeper, who has perfected the art of looking both deaf and threatening at once, waits for them to realize they can't leave until he's paid. They eventually hand over a few silver coins, muttering about highway robbery, though they both know they drank far more than they can remember. By the hearth, two locals are having a conversation that seems to involve only grunts and hand gestures. After a moment, you realize they're discussing whose ox broke the fence last night. The answer, as far as you can tell, is both of theirs. They nod, satisfied, and go back to eating. From the stables outside comes the sound of life returning, horses snorting, chickens clucking, a dog barking at nothing. A few late sleepers stumble through the door into the light, shielding their eyes like vampires. The road outside the tavern is damp from last night's rain, and the air smells of earth and wood smoke. The tavern itself looks different by day. What felt warm and magical under candlelight now seems rough and real. The walls are scarred, the benches uneven, and the rushes on the floor smell faintly of mildew. But somehow, that doesn't take away from its charm, it just makes it honest. This is no royal hall or fancy inn. It's a place that wears its history in layers of soot and laughter. A boy comes in carrying a bucket of water from the well, sloshing half of it on his feet. The innkeeper waves him toward the kitchen, and moments later, the sound of washing and clattering dishes begins. The tavern slowly starts to smell cleaner, though it will never quite escape its own scent, that mix of ale, wood, and centuries of conversation. The quiet is nice for a while, until a familiar voice breaks it. The storyteller, impossibly awake, is already at his usual table. He's sipping something dark and steaming, probably the innkeeper's strongest morning brew, and grinning like he never slept at all. A fine night, he says to no one in particular. Fine enough to make saints out of sinners, or at least give them good stories. Someone groans in response. Someone else mutters that saints wouldn't have the headache he does. The storyteller laughs, and begins humming a tune under his breath, tapping his fingers on the table. It's hard not to like the man. He seems like he's always been here, part of the furniture, part of the tavern itself. Maybe he has. Every medieval tavern had one. The talker, the wanderer, the one who traded tales for meals and company. He knew every road, every rumor, and every way to make you forget your troubles for a few minutes. Outside, the day brightens, and through the small windows, you can see the village waking up. Farmers with carts roll by, a priest walks past with his robes gathered to avoid puddles, and children chase a stray dog down the lane. The sound of the hammer from the blacksmith's forge starts up, steady and rhythmic, and the smell of baking bread drifts from somewhere nearby. Inside, life continues at a slower pace. A few travelers linger, not ready to face the road yet. The innkeeper's wife takes stock of what's left, a few loaves, half a barrel of ale, and not enough coins to make her smile. Still, she shrugs. Tonight, the place will fill again. It always does. By late morning, most of the guests have gone. The benches are empty, the mugs stacked. The innkeeper stands in the doorway for a moment, looking out at the sun climbing higher. For a few precious hours, the tavern can breathe. The quiet feels almost strange, fragile, like the pause between two heartbeats. In the kitchen, the cook hums to herself as she prepares dough for the next meal. She works by habit, her hands knowing the rhythm of kneading, folding, shaping. There's something peaceful about it, this small domestic rhythm that keeps the tavern alive. For all the noise and chaos it holds at night, the tavern depends on these quiet hours, these steady hands that rebuild what the night destroyed. As the afternoon approaches, a new sound breaks the calm wheels on gravel, hooves and voices. Travelers again, maybe merchants, maybe pilgrims. The innkeeper sighs, squares his shoulders, and calls for his wife. The cycle begins again. Soon, laughter will rise, mugs will clink, and the tavern will fill with life. But for now, in this gentle moment, the place stands in balance, between night and day, between stories and silence. A small wooden heart beating steadily in the middle of a noisy, unpredictable world. And somewhere, tucked in the corner, the storyteller is still humming, his cup long empty, his mind already shaping the next tale that will drift across the firelight tonight. By the time dusk rolls around again, the tavern is already stirring back to life. The innkeeper's wife lights the first candles, their soft glow returning warmth to the wooden walls. Outside, the air smells like wet earth and smoke. Inside, it's the familiar comfort of roasted onions, wood fire, and the faint tang of old ale. The benches have been swept, the mugs wiped, and the rushes on the floor replaced with fresher ones, though they'll be filthy again within the hour. The first guest through the door is a peddler, dragging a pack nearly as large as himself. He calls out a cheerful greeting, already talking about the fine combs, ribbons, and trinkets he's selling. The innkeeper nods, half listening, and slides a mug of ale toward him. Within minutes, the man's already deep into a story about a haunted bridge 2 villages over, and how he escaped a ghost by throwing his boots at it. No one believes him, but they listen anyway. The second arrival is a group of pilgrims, dusty, tired, and hungry. They wear badges on their cloaks, showing where they've been. Canterbury, Santiago, maybe even Rome. Their faces are sunburned, their sandals worn thin, but there's a quiet pride in their exhaustion. The innkeeper's wife shows them to a long bench near the hearth, where they sit gratefully, rubbing their feet and murmuring prayers of thanks that their day's walking is done. Before long, the tavern starts filling faster. Farmers finishing their chores drift in, followed by laborers, millers, and the village reeve, who insists on sitting in the same corner every night. There's laughter at the door as someone struggles to fit a cartwheel through the frame. Apparently they've brought it in to keep it safe from thieves. The innkeeper groans, muttering that he's running a tavern, not a barn, but he lets it slide. And then, as if to remind everyone that the world beyond the village still exists, a new figure appears in the doorway. His cloak is fine, too fine for a place like this, and his boots are spotless despite the muddy road. A nobleman, or maybe a messenger from one. He steps inside, eyes adjusting to the dim light, and the room quiets just a little. In the Middle Ages, a stranger dressed well could mean anything. A tax collector, a knight, or trouble. But this man simply nods, drops a silver coin on the counter, and asks for wine. Not ale wine. That alone marks him as someone different. The innkeeper, wisely, doesn't ask questions. He produces the best he has, which still probably tastes faintly like vinegar, and offers it with a respectful bow. The noble takes a seat near the fire, his back to the wall, as if he doesn't entirely trust anyone here. He eats quietly, keeping one hand near the dagger on his belt. But slowly, the noise of the room swells back to normal. The fiddler starts tuning. Mugs clink. Someone laughs too loudly, and the noble's presence fades into the rhythm of the night. One of the pilgrims, an older woman with sharp eyes, leans toward the stranger and asks where he's headed. He hesitates before saying he's bound north, toward a castle beyond the woods. The woman nods knowingly, as if she's heard of the place. Maybe she has, maybe she hasn't. In taverns, everyone pretends to know more than they do. At another table, a pair of farmers argue about weather signs. One swears the sky's red glow means a good harvest, the other insists it means famine. The noble glances up at their shouting, half amused, half annoyed. You can almost see the thought in his head, how far away this noisy, simple world feels from the polished halls he's used to. But as the evening deepens, even he begins to relax. The fiddler plays something slow, mournful, beautiful. The noble closes his eyes for a moment, listening. The pilgrims hum softly to themselves. Even the innkeeper, usually too busy to sit, leans against the counter and watches the fire. For a rare moment, the tavern feels peaceful, united by the kind of silence that only comes after too much noise. Then, as always, someone ruins it in the best possible way. A jester, or at least a man pretending to be one, bursts in with a shout, wearing mismatched colors and bells that jingle every time he moves. He's already drunk, or maybe just always like this. He declares he's been hired by a baron 3 towns over, but was unfairly dismissed for excessive brilliance. The room laughs, and he bows dramatically before demanding a drink. The noble watches with a faint smile. The pilgrims cross themselves, unsure whether to laugh or pray for his soul. The jester climbs onto a table, balancing a mug on his head and reciting a twisted version of the Lord's Prayer that earns both applause and gasps. The innkeeper nearly tells him to leave, but can't resist the sound of coins hitting the table. The crowd's paying to see what he'll do next. He starts a tale about a king who tried to outlaw laughter, and before long, the whole room is roaring. Even the noble laughs, quietly at first, then more freely. The tavern, as it always does, has swallowed another soul into its orbit. As the jester takes a bow, the storyteller in the corner claps slowly, smirking. "Not bad," he says, "for someone who only tells jokes." The jester grins back. "Better than someone who tells lies." A small crowd gathers. The duel of words begins. The two men go back and forth, trading riddles, insults, and clever lines that make the crowd howl. It's an old tradition, older than most kingdoms. Verbal duels like this were entertainment and sport all in one. Whoever made the crowd laugh harder, think sharper, or gasp louder, won. There's no prize but pride, yet pride is everything in a tavern. The noble leans forward, the pilgrims whisper prayers for the storyteller's victory, and even the innkeeper stops pretending to clean. After several rounds, the jester concedes with a dramatic bow. "You win, old man," he says, "but only because your tongue is sharper than your mind." The storyteller chuckles. "That's what my third wife said, too." The crowd roars again, and the tension breaks completely. The noble raises his mug, calling for another round for everyone. The innkeeper hesitates only long enough to make sure he heard correctly. Soon, mugs are refilled, songs start up again, and the jester and storyteller are drinking side by side, already plotting to perform together tomorrow night. Outside, the wind howls. Rain starts to fall, tapping softly on the roof, but no one inside cares. The tavern glows with warmth, laughter, and the flicker of candlelight. In a world where travel was dangerous, war was common, and tomorrow was never guaranteed. This brief, messy joy was everything. You catch a glimpse of the noble again, leaning back, watching the crowd. There's a look on his face that's hard to name, maybe envy, maybe relief. For one night, he's not a man of rank or duty. He's just another guest in a noisy, smoky room, surrounded by strangers who treat him like one of their own. As the night drifts on, the jester sings, the storyteller laughs, and the pilgrims fall asleep where they sit, their rosaries still in hand. The noble finishes his wine, stares into the fire, and smiles to himself, a small, tired smile that says he'll remember this night long after he's gone. When the candles burn low and the last song fades, the tavern finally begins to quiet. The noble rises, drops another coin on the counter, and disappears into the dark. No one sees him go, not really. The door closes, and all that remains is the echo of laughter, the smell of smoke, and the faint rattle of the jester's bells. Morning crawls back into the tavern with its usual lack of mercy. The rain from last night has left the road outside slick and shining, and the whole village smells faintly of wet straw. Inside, the tavern is quieter than usual, but not for long. Word has spread. Someone important drank here last night. Someone rich. Someone who paid for everyone's ale without flinching. By the time the first customers arrive, the rumors are already running wild. The peddler swears the stranger was a knight returning from crusade. The miller insists he was a royal messenger. The blacksmith's apprentice claims he was a prince in disguise, testing the loyalty of common folk. The innkeeper, who knows the truth, is probably much simpler, doesn't bother correcting anyone. A bit of mystery never hurt business. The pilgrims are still here, slowly gathering their things. They look better this morning, rested, fed, and faintly smugged from having shared a bench with nobility, or what they believe was nobility. One of them swears the man blessed their journey. Another insists he promised to pray for them. The innkeeper just nods, letting them believe whatever makes their road feel shorter. As the fire warms the chill out of the room, people drift in one by one. Farmers on their way to market stop for a cup of small ale, weak, barely fermented, but enough to take the edge off the cold. The blacksmith arrives later, already sweating from the forge, with a grin that says he's heard every rumor twice already. He orders bread and cheese and settles by the door, ready to add his own spin to the morning stories. The tavern's like that, part kitchen, part church, part newsstand. Everything worth knowing passes through it, eventually. It's where deals are struck, marriages are arranged, and grudges are quietly fueled. Sometimes it's even where forgiveness happens, though that's rarer and usually involves a lot of ale. The innkeeper's wife moves through the room, refilling mugs and pretending not to listen, though she could repeat every word later if she wanted to. She's seen this kind of thing before. Give the village one interesting stranger, and it will feed on that story for weeks. A group of shepherds comes in from the hills, shaking water from their cloaks. They take seats near the hearth and immediately join the gossip. One claims he saw the noble's horse this morning near the river, tall, white, and wearing silver tack. Another says, nonsense, it was just the Reeves mule looking cleaner than usual. The argument goes on, cheerful and pointless. Then the storyteller strolls in, late as always, humming to himself. He's carrying a fresh loaf under one arm, probably lifted from the baker as payment for a song. The crowd greets him like an old friend, and before long someone shouts, "Tell us about the noble." He smiles, takes his time settling onto his stool, and leans forward with a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "Ah," he says softly, "the man with silver coins and quiet eyes." The room hushes a little, everyone leaning in. He wasn't a knight, no, nor a prince. He was a man cursed by love, wandering the land until he could forget her name. A few people groan. "That's just a tale," someone says. "He was no cursed lover." The storyteller shrugs, still smiling. "Maybe, but when a man drinks alone and stares at firelight, what else could he be?" And just like that, the rumor changes again. By noon, people will be whispering that the noble is a heartbroken lord, searching for redemption. By evening, someone will say he murdered his beloved. By tomorrow, he'll be a ghost. That's how stories work here. They grow like ivy, twisting around truth until no one remembers where they began. The day moves slowly. Outside, carts creak past, chickens scatter, and children chase each other through puddles. Inside, the tavern settles into its softer rhythm. Meals served, travelers resting, and conversation flowing like water. The noble's visit has given everyone something to talk about, something to imagine. It's amazing how far a single night's mystery can stretch in a quiet village. By afternoon, new travelers arrive, merchants from the next town over, their cloaks heavy with rain. They bring their own news, a fair in the city, a thief caught in the market, taxes rising again. Real events, yet somehow less interesting than the tale of the noble stranger. The villagers listen politely, nodding, then steer the talk back to their favorite topic. Even the merchants give in eventually, pretending they might have heard of such a man. Meanwhile, in the corner, the innkeeper quietly counts the extra coins in his box. He'll never admit it out loud, but business has been good since last night. People come not just for ale, but for the story, to sit in the same place the noble sat, to drink from the same kind of mug. A brush with greatness, even imaginary, is worth paying for. Toward evening, the pilgrims finally gather their packs and say their farewells. They leave with full bellies, blessed by half the room, and certain that their journey is favored by fate. As they disappear down the road, the innkeeper's wife shakes her head, smiling faintly. Every traveler leaves a little magic behind, she thinks. Not real magic, just the kind that lingers in memory. As twilight falls, the tavern fills again. The peddler returns, the shepherds too, and the jester, somehow sober enough to stand upright. He's already announcing that he'll perform tonight's story. The noble and the innkeeper's daughter. The crowd cheers. The innkeeper groans. The innkeeper's daughter, who's been serving bread all day, rolls her eyes and mutters that she'd brain him with a ladle, if he dares include her name. The fiddler tunes his instrument. The fire crackles. The noise builds again. Laughter, shouts, the scrape of chairs. The tavern's heartbeat returns to full rhythm. When the jester finally begins, he's halfway between serious and ridiculous. His version of last night's story is dramatic, full of sighs and gestures. The noble becomes braver, the wine finer, the innkeeper's daughter more beautiful than Helen herself. The crowd laps it up, roaring with laughter when the jester dramatically declares his love to the ceiling beams. Even the innkeeper laughs in spite of himself. But beneath all the noise and joy, there's something else, a quiet truth that everyone in the room feels but doesn't say. For most of them, life is simple and hard. Fields, taxes, cold winters, aching backs. But nights like this, where the walls glow and stories flow like ale, they remind everyone that the world is still full of wonder, that something special can walk through the door any day. As the performance ends, the room bursts into applause. The jester bows, the fiddler plays a triumphant tune, and someone starts a round of toasts. The innkeeper's wife sighs, knowing tomorrow she'll be cleaning spilled ale off the floor again, but she smiles anyway. Because this, messy as it is what keeps people alive. Laughter, warmth, the illusion that for a few hours, everything is exactly as it should be. Later, when most have stumbled home, the innkeeper and his wife sit by the dying fire. The tavern is quiet again, but it feels different now, softer, fuller. He says, "Funny how one stranger can change a whole week." She nods. "He'll be forgotten soon enough," she says, "but not the story." And that's the truth of it. In a world without paper news or printed books, the tavern was the heartbeat of memory. Every night's tale became tomorrow's history, shaped by laughter and ale, until it became something worth retelling. Outside, the rain has stopped. The stars are faint through the clouds, and the road stretches dark and endless beyond the door. Somewhere out there, the noble rides on, unaware that, for one night, he became a legend in a smoky little tavern that will talk about him until the next traveler wanders through. A few days pass, and the tavern's rhythm returns to its usual heartbeat. The gossip about the noble fades like smoke after rain, though once in a while, someone still raises a mug and says, "Remember that night?" And everyone nods, pretending they remember it better than they actually do. The tavern, after all, doesn't live on facts, it lives on the retelling. The weather is turning. Mornings are colder now, the air sharp enough to bite. Smoke rises earlier from chimneys, and travelers come in bundled tight, faces red from the wind. The innkeeper's wife has started adding more barley to the stew, stretching it to feed whoever wanders in before dusk. One of those travelers, one crisp morning, is a monk. You can tell even before he speaks, the brown wool habit, the worn sandals, the calm way he moves through the noise. He carries a small satchel, a walking stick, and the quiet air of someone who's seen more than he's said. The tavern quiets slightly when he enters, not silent, just respectful. Even the loudest drunk knows better than to heckle a holy man before his second drink. The innkeeper greets him politely, offering ale or water. The monk chooses ale, the safer option, he says with a gentle smile, and takes a seat near the fire. It doesn't take long for someone to start asking questions. "Where have you come from, father? What news from the abbey? Is it true monks can read the stars?" He answers kindly, his voice soft but clear. He's been walking for weeks, he says, collecting notes for the abbey's chronicle, a record of the villages, the people, and the places between. At that, the room perks up. A chronicle, that means writing. That means their little corner of the world might end up in a book, somewhere monks read by candlelight. The villagers look at him differently now, with curiosity, a hint of pride, and maybe a little fear. What will he write about them? The monk takes another sip of ale, and sets his cup down thoughtfully. "You can tell a great deal about a people," he says, "by how they gather to eat and drink." The innkeeper chuckles at that. "Then you'll have plenty to write about here." He does. The monk spends the evening quietly, watching the way the blacksmith laughs with his whole body, the way the innkeeper's wife manages 10 tasks at once, the way the fiddler's fingers dance over worn strings. He doesn't judge, only observes. When someone asks if he'll join a song, he does, his voice surprisingly strong. It's an old hymn, but half the room hums along anyway, pretending they remember the words. Later, as the tavern begins to empty, the monk and the innkeeper share a late supper, bread, cheese, and stew that's been simmering all day. The monk thanks him for his kindness, then says, "It's strange. The abbots think taverns are dens of sin. But I've found more charity in places like this than in some monasteries." The innkeeper laughs quietly. "Aye, we're sinners, father, but we share our bread." The monk smiles. "And your ale?" He asks about the village, the harvest, the Lord, the market days. The innkeeper answers honestly, if a bit cautiously. Life's hard, taxes are worse, but people manage, they always do. The monk writes in his little notebook, careful, deliberate script that catches the firelight. Before going to bed, he steps outside for a moment, looking at the stars. The sky here is clearer than in the cities. The wind carries the smell of wet hay and smoke. Somewhere nearby a dog barks, then goes quiet again. The monk folds his hands and whispers a prayer, not just for the souls inside, but for the peace they somehow keep in a rough, uncertain world. The next morning, he joins the villagers for breakfast. Pottage thick with oats and small ale again. The chatter starts early. Who's buying grain? Whose cow got loose? Who's courting who? The monk listens, occasionally asking a question, occasionally jotting a note. At one point, a young man asks him why he bothers writing all this down. No one reads about villages like ours. He says, we're not kings or saints. The monk looks up from his page and smiles. History, he says, is not made only by those who rule. It's made by those who endure. The room goes quiet for a moment, not because they fully understand, but because it sounds beautiful. Then someone jokes that endurance doesn't pay the rent, and the laughter comes back. By midday, the monk is ready to leave. The innkeeper won't take payment, so he leaves a small parchment instead, a blessing, written in careful Latin, for the tavern's continued fortune. He promises to mention them in his writings, and perhaps one day, he says, pilgrims will come seeking not only holy relics, but the place where good ale and good hearts meet. When he walks away down the road, staff tapping against the stones, the innkeeper's wife watches from the doorway. Think he'll really write about us? She asks. Maybe, her husband replies, or maybe he'll forget. Either way, we'll keep pouring. But he doesn't forget. Weeks later, in a cold monastery scriptorium, the monk adds a line to his notes. In a small tavern beyond the forest, I found the laughter of men and the warmth of women more holy than relics. For there, in smoke and song, I saw the soul of the common people, bright as any candle in the house of God. And that's how one nameless village quietly enters history, not through a great battle or a king's decree, but through the ink of a tired monk who saw something worth remembering. Back in the tavern, winter begins to bite harder. The fire burns longer, the ale flows slower, and the air smells of damp wool and wood smoke. Travelers are fewer now, but those who come stay longer, waiting for spring, or for news, or just for warmth. The storyteller returns, claiming he's been to the city. He brings tales of plague rumors, of kings planning wars, of miracles witnessed on dusty roads. No one knows how much of it is true, but they listen anyway. Truth isn't the point. The point is to keep the night alive, and alive it stays. Even in deep winter, the tavern glows like a lantern in the dark. The frozen fields, the long nights, the hunger, all of it fades when the door closes and the firelight paints the faces of friends. Sometimes, when the crowd thins and the coals burn low, the innkeeper's wife will look at the parchment hanging by the hearth, the monk's blessing, smudged now with smoke and time. She can't read it, but she knows what it means. A reminder that what they do here, feeding, listening, sheltering, matters, even if no one writes it down again. One night, a storm rolls in from the sea, wild, angry, and endless. Wind hammers the shutters, rain leaks through the roof, and the tavern shakes like an old ship. A handful of travelers huddled by the fire, mugs clutched tight, while the innkeeper and his wife rush to keep the place from flooding. Lightning flashes, and for a moment the whole room glows white. Then the fiddler starts to play, slowly, softly, at first just a few notes against the storm's roar. The others join in, the storyteller tapping the table, the jester humming, the shepherd clapping. Before long, the noise of their music rises to match the wind. It's chaotic, beautiful, and utterly human. This defiance in the face of a storm. Outside, nature howls. Inside, they laugh, sing, spill ale, and tell stories like they're keeping the darkness at bay with their own noise. When morning finally comes, the storm has passed. The tavern roof leaks in 3 new places, and someone's boots have floated into the hearth overnight. But everyone's alive, everyone's smiling, and that's enough. The innkeeper's wife ladles out breakfast, muttering that if God meant for them to sleep dry, he'd have built better roofs. The days go on, seasons turn, the noble's legend fades, the monk's blessing yellows, the laughter stays. The tavern, unremarkable and eternal, stands as it always has, a crossroads of stories, a refuge for the tired, a place where even the smallest lives burn bright for a little while before the road takes them on again. And if you happened to walk in then, cold, hungry, carrying your own weight of worries, you'd be welcomed too. Someone would slide a mug your way, someone else would ask where you came from, and before you knew it, you'd be part of the story too. The snow doesn't melt all at once, it lingers, stubborn as an old habit, until one morning it's just gone. In its place, the road turns to mud, the air smells of wet earth and smoke, and the fields start to breathe again. Spring has arrived, half-drunk and impatient, like a friend bursting into the tavern uninvited. The first sign isn't the flowers or the birds, it's the sound of wheels, creaking cartwheels, squeaking and singing as they roll into the village square. Behind them come voices, loud, laughing, strange, foreign accents, bright cloth, the kind of noise that makes every villager look up from their chores and grin despite themselves. Traveling performers, they arrive with the morning mist, a dozen of them, maybe more. Musicians, jugglers, dancers, acrobats, and a man who swears he can speak to animals, though his dog looks thoroughly unimpressed. Their wagon is painted in faded reds and golds, their clothes patched but colorful, and their spirits far warmer than the weather. For the innkeeper, it's both joy and chaos. The moment the first drumbeat echoes through the street, people pour out of their houses like bees from a hive. Children chase the juggler, dogs bark at the acrobat, and even the reeve's wife, usually the picture of dignity, can't help tapping her foot when the fiddle starts. By midday, the performers have declared the tavern their stage. They strike a deal with the innkeeper room, board, and ale, in exchange for entertainment. He agrees without hesitation. A night like this could feed his business for a week. The tavern becomes a carnival before sunset. Benches are moved aside, tables pushed against the walls, and the air fills with the sound of tuning instruments and shouted jokes. The innkeeper's wife sighs, already calculating how many mugs will be broken before the night's over. When evening falls, the crowd is packed tight. Farmers, merchants, shepherds, even the miller's sour-faced apprentice. Everyone squeezes in. The air is thick with heat, sweat, laughter, and the sweet smell of spilled ale. The first act is music, a wild rolling tune that sounds like thunder learned to dance. The fiddler's bow flies, the drum pounds, and the crowd claps along, stomping their boots on the wooden floor until the whole room shakes. The sound isn't refined, it's alive. Then come the jugglers, two brothers, quick and cocky. They toss knives, apples, mugs, anything within reach. When one of them snatches a rolling potato from a plate mid-air, the room explodes in cheers. Someone yells, "Do it again," and he bows, pretending to trip over his own feet. Next is the fire-eater. The children squeal, the adults gasp, and the innkeeper mutters a prayer for his roof. The flames dance like golden serpents, lighting up faces, mugs, and the rough wooden beams above. When the fire-eater finally bows, his hair slightly singed, the applause sounds like rain on 1,000 rooftops. And then comes the heart of it all, the storyteller. A woman this time, tall and sharpened, her voice smooth as warm honey. She steps into the center of the room, raises her hand, and without a single instrument, the tavern falls silent. She tells a story of knights and ghosts, of a love that crossed battlefields and graves. Her words ripple through the crowd like a spell. Even the drunkest men lean forward, eyes wide, breath slow. When she describes the moment the ghost lover returns, the room is so quiet you can hear the crackle of the fire. When she finishes, the silence hangs for just a heartbeat, and then the whole tavern erupts. Cheers, shouts, mugs slamming against tables. The storyteller bows deeply, and the jester from the tavern's usual crowd leaps up, insisting he can improve the ending. Within seconds, they're dueling, one with words, one with wit, and the crowd is doubled over laughing. The performers stay for days. Each night brings something new: music, plays, dances, puppet shows, riddles. The tavern has never been so alive. The innkeeper barely sleeps, the barrels empty faster than he can tap them, and the villagers spend every spare coin they've got, but no one complains. After a long, cold winter, it feels like the whole world is finally awake again. By the third night, something changes. The performers and villagers aren't just audience and actors anymore. They're part of the same rhythm. The shepherd sings along with the fiddler. The blacksmith helps lift the acrobat onto a beam. The innkeeper's wife dances just once, but long enough for everyone to cheer. There's no class, no rank, no titles here. The Lord's steward and the beggar clap side by side. The world outside, with its taxes, rules, and endless hard days, seems to melt away. For a few hours, it's just people, light, and laughter. Later that night, as the music slows and the ale runs low, one of the performers, a quiet man with a harp, plays a song unlike the others. It's soft, slow, haunting, a tune that feels older than memory itself. No one sings, no one speaks. Even the jester, for once, sits still. The song tells no story, but somehow it says everything about longing, and wandering, and the small, shining joys that make all the rest bearable. When it ends, the silence feels sacred. A few people wipe their eyes. The innkeeper clears his throat and says, "Another round," and the laughter returns, gentle this time. The next morning, the performers prepare to leave. The wagon creaks under the weight of their gear, the paint peeling but proud. The villagers gather to see them off, offering bread, coins, or just thanks. The innkeeper's wife hands them a bundle of food for the road, pretending not to get emotional. Before they go, the storyteller presses a small charm into her hand, a carved bit of wood, shaped like a fox. "For luck," she says, "and for stories." As they disappear down the road, the tavern feels strangely quiet, like a heartbeat skipping after laughter. The villagers linger for a while, reluctant to let go of the joy that had filled the room. But slowly, life returns to its ordinary pace. Still, something lingers, a spark. For weeks afterward, people hum the tunes, retell the stories, try to juggle apples, and end up dropping them into the stew. The tavern has changed, not in its walls or furniture, but in its spirit. It's brighter somehow, even on dull days. On one of those quiet evenings, the innkeeper and his wife sit by the fire again. He says, "You think they'll come back next year?" She smiles faintly. "If not them, others will. There's always another story waiting for a good fire." Outside, spring deepens. The fields green, the nights shorten, and the air hums with life again. But inside the tavern, where the walls still remember laughter, and the floor still creaks with the echo of dance, it's as if time itself pauses, holding on to the warmth just a little longer. And somewhere, far down another road, the travelers sing the tavern's name into a new song, a tune about a place where strangers become friends, and laughter is holy. It's just another verse in their endless wandering, but it carries a spark of that smoky little room, where for 3 nights, the world was nothing but joy. The songs of spring don't last forever. They never do. One morning, before the sun is fully up, the sound of hooves and armor replaces the cheerful jingle of wagons. The innkeeper wakes to shouting in the street, harsh, hurried voices. Soldiers, not an army, just a troop, maybe 20 men, dusty and hard-eyed, their tabards torn, and their horses foaming. They don't knock. Soldiers rarely do. The door bursts open, the cold rushes in with them, and suddenly the tavern smells of iron and sweat instead of bread and ale. Food, their captain says, and ale, and beds, if you've got them. He doesn't ask how much. He doesn't need to. The innkeeper just nods and starts moving. Refuse them, and trouble follows. Serve them, and maybe you make it through the night with your roof still on. By the time the villagers hear what's happening, the tavern's already full of steel. The benches creak under the weight of armor. Helmets and swords clutter the tables. The soldiers eat like wolves, tearing bread apart, sloshing ale across the wood. A few try to joke, but the laughter doesn't reach their eyes. The innkeeper's wife keeps her head down, moving quickly, speaking softly. She's seen this before. Traveling soldiers mean stories no one wants to tell. Lost battles, burned villages, friends left behind. You can hear it in the way they drink. Outside, the fields are quiet. The villagers keep their distance. Even the dogs know better than to bark. After the first rush of food and drink, the room settles into an uneasy calm. The fire pops in the hearth. The captain sits apart, cleaning his sword with a strip of cloth that used to be white. He's not young, grey in his beard, a scar near his temple, and his eyes look somewhere far away, like he's listening to ghosts. The innkeeper brings him another mug, careful to keep his tone respectful. "Long road?" he asks. The captain nods. Too long, he doesn't elaborate. Soldiers rarely do. But after a while, he says quietly, "We lost the last town. Plague took it. Then bandits took what was left." He stares into his drink. "We're heading home. What's left of us?" The innkeeper doesn't know what to say, so he says nothing. just leaves the man to his silence. As night falls, the mood shifts. The ale begins to work its usual spell, softening the edges of memory. One soldier pulls out a flute, another hums along. The tune is slow, cracked, like something remembered from childhood. It fills the room with a strange warmth, not joy, but something close to peace. The villagers start to edge closer, curiosity stronger than fear. Before long, a few of them are sitting near the fire too, offering bread or company. The line between soldier and stranger blurs, the way it always does in the tavern when the world outside gets too hard to face. Then someone starts talking, not about battles or kings, but about home, about fields and wives and sons left behind. One man, barely 20, says he used to be a blacksmith's apprentice before the war. Another admits he joined for coin, then stayed because there was nowhere left to go. Their words mix with the crackle of the fire, the sound of rain on the shutters, the smell of wet boots steaming dry. The innkeeper's wife listens as she works, her heart heavier than she admit. She's seen too many young men come through like this, tired, half-starved, laughing at nothing. Most of them never come back. At one point, a soldier stands and raises his mug. To those who didn't make it, the others raise theirs too, and the villagers follow. The silence after the toast is longer than the song that follows. As the night deepens, the stories turn darker. Someone mentions a burned church. Someone else talks about a winter march, where the snow was so deep they had to eat their horses. The jester, usually the loudest in the room, doesn't interrupt. Even he knows when laughter would sound wrong. One soldier, sitting by the door, takes out a small wooden token, a child's toy, worn smooth by fingers. He turns it over and over in his palm. When the innkeeper asks softly if it's his son's, the man just nods. Was, he says, and nothing more. By the time the last candle burns low, the room is quiet again. The soldiers sleep where they sit, armor half off, dreams heavy. The tavern smells of smoke and sorrow and iron. In the early grey light of morning, the captain pays what he can, a few coins, a silver clasp from his cloak. It's not enough, but the innkeeper takes it without complaint. The captain pauses at the door. "You've given us more than food," he says. "You've given us a place to be men again, not ghosts." The innkeeper just nods. He's not sure what to say to that either. When the soldiers leave, the silence they leave behind is deafening. The villagers drift back in, cautiously at first, as if afraid the ghosts might still be sitting there. They help clean up, gathering mugs, righting benches, wiping the floor. No one says much. That evening, the tavern feels empty, even when it's full. The laughter sounds thinner. The jesters' jokes don't land quite right. The fire still burns, but it doesn't feel warm enough. War has a way of touching even those who never lift a sword. Days pass. The muddy footprints fade. The smell of iron gives way to smoke and stew again. The tavern breathes out, slowly, painfully. But something lingers, a memory, a weight, like the echo of distant drums. One night, the storyteller returns. She listens to what happened, nods, and says, "They'll be in the songs now." The innkeeper frowns. Songs? She smiles sadly. A good tavern keeps more than ale. It keeps memory. And someone has to remember. So she tells their story. The soldiers who came in from the rain, the toast to the lost, the laughter that refused to die. Her voice fills the tavern, turning grief into something softer. The villagers listen in silence, their eyes shining in the firelight. When she's done, the innkeeper raises his mug. "To memory," he says quietly, and everyone drinks. Outside, the wind moves through the fields, whispering over the roads those men took, and the ones they'll never walk again. But inside the tavern, their voices linger, in song, in story, in the warmth that keeps the dark at bay. It's strange, really. For all its noise and chaos, a tavern is a kind of church. Not for saints, but for the ordinary, for those who've suffered, laughed, fought, and still come home to share a meal. It doesn't save souls, maybe, but it reminds them they're still human. And sometimes, that's enough. By the time the next dawn comes, the tavern is quiet again. But the fire burns steady, the mugs are lined up clean, and the air feels different, heavy, but alive. The innkeeper stands by the door, looking out at the road. Somewhere out there, the soldiers are still marching. Maybe they'll come back one day, maybe not. But if they do, the door will be open. The months slide by, quietly at first, the way spring sneaks into winter. The fields turn green again. The roads dry out, and laughter starts to sound less forced inside the tavern. It's not that people forget the soldiers who came and went. No, their stories live in the quiet corners, but life, stubborn as grass through stone, keeps growing. The innkeeper's wife plants herbs outside the door again. She hums as she works, low and tuneless, but it fills the air. The smell of rosemary and thyme starts drifting through the windows, mixing with the scent of baking bread. For the first time in months, the tavern smells like home again, not just shelter. The jester returns to his old self too, though with a little less wine and a little more wisdom. He's added a new joke to his routine, something about soldiers drinking the place dry and still forgetting to pay their tab. People laugh, not because it's particularly funny, but because it feels good to laugh again. By midsummer, the tavern's busiest season begins. Travelers are back on the road, merchants, pilgrims, minstrels, farmers bringing grain to sell at the market. The door swings open almost constantly. Each time the sound of boots on the floorboards, the scrape of chairs, and the low hum of conversation filled the air like music. You'd think after all these years the innkeeper would tire of it, the endless cleaning, the spilled ale, the snores of strangers upstairs, but there's a quiet pride in his eyes now. This place, his place, has seen war, plague, and famine. It's still standing. That counts for something. There's one corner of the tavern, by the window, where the sunlight falls just right in the afternoon. That's where the regulars gather now. A miller missing 2 fingers, a widow who can outdrink most men, a scribe with ink-stained hands who's always writing things he never reads out loud. They argue, gossip, laugh, share food. It's not a grand sight, but it's real. Sometimes, when the sun's low and the smoke turns golden, a traveler will stop and just watch. The warmth, the chatter, the clatter of spoons against bowls. It's a small world unto itself. For a moment, you forget the outside world even exists. One evening, a familiar sound breaks the calm, the rhythmic clop of hooves. The innkeeper looks up from his ledger as a group of riders appear on the horizon. Not soldiers this time, traders. Their carts are heavy, their cloaks bright, and their laughter carries even before they reach the door. When they enter, the room shifts, not with fear, but with curiosity. They bring the scent of far-off places, salt from the sea, spice from the south, dust from the road. One of them, a tall man with a braided beard and golden rings in his ears, tosses a coin onto the counter. "Ale for my men," he says, "and maybe a story or two, if your house has them." The innkeeper smiles. "We've got both in plenty." Soon the tavern is alive again, louder, fuller, the way it used to be before the bad times. The merchants trade tales of their journeys, ships that nearly sank in storms, towns where the streets are paved with marble, markets that never close, even at night. The locals listen wide-eyed, half believing, half doubting, but wholly entertained. And of course, with merchants come things, trinkets, silks, spices, things the village hasn't seen in years. The innkeeper buys a small sack of saffron for his wife, far too expensive for the kitchen, but worth it for the color it adds to the stew. The jester gets a new lute string. The widow gets a bit of perfume, which she pretends not to like, but wears every market day after. One night, when the tavern is packed wall to wall, a storm hits. The wind howls, the shutters rattle, rain pounds the roof like a drum. But inside, the fire roars, the ale flows, and the world feels impossibly small and safe. Someone starts singing an old love song, slow and mournful. Others join in, one by one, until the whole tavern hums like a single heartbeat. The walls shake with laughter and thunder both, and for once, no one cares about the difference. By morning, the storm has passed. The roads are mud again, the carts stuck until the sun dries them. The merchants grumble, but no one's in a hurry to leave. The tavern's warmth has worked its quiet magic. During breakfast, the scribe by the window scratches something new into his parchment. The innkeeper asks what it is. The man smiles faintly. "A record," he says, "of this place, of what it keeps alive." The innkeeper chuckles. "A tavern, worth writing about. More than you'd think," the scribe replies. "It's where the world comes to remember it's human." As the weeks pass, the harvest season creeps in. Farmers come back, dusty and tired, with stories of near-missed storms and good grain. The tavern becomes the heart of the village once more, the place where deals are made, songs are traded, and love stories quietly begin. Yes, love stories. They always find their way in. There's a young girl, the baker's daughter, who's taken to serving bread at the tables. There's also a new face, a shepherd, tall and quiet, with hands rough from work, and a voice that carries like music when he sings. It doesn't take long before the two start finding excuses to be in the same room, passing mugs, trading smiles, pretending not to notice when the jester winks. One night, during the harvest feast, he brings her a wreath of wildflowers. Nothing fancy, just daisies and heather, tied with a bit of twine. But when he puts it on her head, the room bursts into applause. The jester plays something soft on his lute, the old folks clap in rhythm, and for once, no one's thinking about taxes or blisters or the price of grain. Love, laughter, song, the old trinity of tavern magic. And of course, it wouldn't be a proper evening without a few quarrels too. Two farmers argue about whose ox is stronger, a merchant swears his ale's been watered down, and the widow declares she could arm wrestle any man in the room and win, which, for the record, she does, twice. The air is thick with smoke, joy, and the faint scent of spilled cider. Children peek in through the door, giggling, while their parents pretend not to notice. The jester stands on a stool, raising his mug, to surviving another year without the roof catching fire. He cries. The room erupts in laughter. Somewhere near the back, the innkeeper leans against the wall, watching it all with tired eyes and a soft smile. His tavern isn't just wood and stone anymore. It's a living thing, breathing with the rhythm of the people inside it. Every creak, every laugh, every whispered word adds to its soul. Later that night, when everyone's gone to bed and the last embers fade, he sits alone for a while. He thinks of the years behind him, the feasts, the famines, the faces that came and went. He thinks of how many times he swept this same floor, mended this same chair, poured ale for strangers who became friends. He hears the wind outside, soft through the thatch. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, but it sounds far away. Inside, the silence is warm. He takes one last drink from his mug, just a sip, and says quietly, to no one in particular, "May the road always lead someone home." Years have passed since that quiet night. The seasons rolled through the tavern's walls like an old melody, familiar, steady, comforting. The tavern didn't just survive. It aged gracefully, like a well-used mug that fits perfectly in the hand. The timber beams are darker now, the floors worn smooth by 1,000 boots. The smell of ale, wood smoke, and laughter has soaked into the walls so deeply that even when the place is empty, it feels alive. The innkeeper's hair is gone grey, though he still moves with the same stubborn rhythm, cleaning mugs, shouting orders, pretending he doesn't hear jokes made at his expense. His wife, just as sharp as ever, still runs the place like a general. She has a way of knowing exactly who's about to start trouble, sometimes before they even realize it themselves. The baker's daughter, the one who once wore the wildflower wreath, now helps behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up and her smile easy. The shepherd who gave her those flowers, he's still around too. They married a few years back, quietly, right here in the tavern, surrounded by friends and too much ale. Now their little boy runs through the hall, dodging boots and dogs, laughing like the walls have never heard sadness. It's strange how time bends in a place like this. The faces change, but the patterns stay. The laughter sounds the same. The songs drift into the same rafters. The tavern doesn't remember names, but it remembers voices. New travelers fill the benches now, younger, bolder, more curious. Some speak of trade routes expanding, of cities growing bigger and brighter. There are whispers of strange inventions, wheels that turn without horses, glass so clear it seems like air. The world beyond the village is changing fast, but here, inside these old walls, the pace remains slow, human, warm. One evening, a traveling scholar arrives, dressed in a dusty robe, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. He orders wine, pulls out a parchment, and starts asking questions. Who built this tavern, he asks. How long has it been standing? The innkeeper laughs. You'd have to ask the ghosts, lad. They've been here longer than me. The scholar stays for 3 nights, taking notes, sketching the wooden beams, interviewing the regulars. He says he's writing a book, something about the lives of common folk. The locals find that hilarious. Common folk, one farmer snorts. You'll have a short book, then we're not that interesting. But the scholar just smiles. On the contrary, he says, it's places like this that make history breathe. He leaves behind a few coins more than he owes and a note on the table that simply reads, to the heart of the village, may it never go silent. The innkeeper keeps it tucked behind the bar. By the time autumn arrives again, a few more changes come with it. The old storyteller by the fire, the one who always had a ghost tale ready, finally runs out of breath one winter night. They bury him on the hill behind the tavern, under an oak tree. On quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right, you can almost hear his voice in the creak of the branches. The jester, older now and slower, still performs, though mostly for the children. His jokes have softened, fewer tricks, more stories. He says laughter keeps the ghosts happy. The children believe him, and maybe he believes it too. The widow who could arm wrestle anyone. She's taken to sitting by the window, nursing her cider, and telling wild tales about her younger days. No one dares correct her, because honestly, she's probably right. The tavern has become a kind of living memory. Travelers come through, stop for a night, and leave with stories. Some tell of cities filled with glass windows, of kings fighting wars across the sea, of monks building strange devices that can copy books faster than any hand. Each tale sounds a little less medieval, a little more modern. The world outside these walls is growing sharper, faster, louder, but inside, it's still wooden tables, firelight, and the clink of mugs. One cold winter's evening, the innkeeper sits by the hearth, staring into the flames. His hands tremble slightly when he lifts his mug. He knows his days of lifting barrels and breaking up brawls are nearly done. The shepherd, now a man grown and steady, has started to take over more of the work. The innkeeper watches him move behind the counter, confident, kind to customers, patient even with drunks. He smiles to himself. The tavern will be fine. That night, as snow drifts past the shutters, a small group of minstrels comes in, half frozen, their instruments wrapped in cloth. The innkeeper waves them toward the fire and tells his wife to bring them food. Soon the tavern fills with music again, not the old songs, but something softer, more wistful. It's the kind of tune that makes you remember faces long gone. The minstrels sing about time, about love, about places that fade but never really die. People listen, some smiling, some with eyes a little too wet. The innkeeper listens too, and when the song ends, he claps quietly. "Play it again," he says. Once more, for the ghosts they do. In the morning, the minstrels are gone, but their song lingers, like the smell of wood smoke. The tavern wakes slowly, chairs scraped back, bread sliced, dogs shoot out the door. The innkeeper's wife hums as she sweeps, the same tune the minstrels played. The boy, their grandson now, really runs in circles, chasing dust motes in the light. That's how time moves in the tavern, not in leaps, but in loops. The same laughter, the same stories, the same rhythm of living and remembering. Then, one spring morning, the innkeeper doesn't come down the stairs. The tavern stays quiet for a moment too long. The wife knows before she even opens the door to their room. He's gone peacefully, with his hand resting on his old mug, as if he'd just paused mid-sip. The village gathers that night. They fill the tavern with candles, and the air hums with memory. The shepherd-turned-innkeeper pours the drinks, his voice soft but steady. The jester tells one last joke, bad enough to make everyone laugh and cry at the same time. And then they raise their mugs to the man who kept the fire burning through war, famine, and joy alike. The tavern doesn't close that night. It never does. Outside, the stars burn bright. The smoke from the chimney rises like a prayer. Inside, the new innkeeper looks around at the same walls, the same worn chairs, the same old door that still creaks. He smiles and says, "Let's keep it warm." And so the tavern breathes again. Different hands, same heartbeat. Days become weeks, weeks become seasons. The world outside shifts, new roads, new trade routes, rumors of exploration across endless seas. But travelers still stop here, drawn by the same warmth, the same promise of ale, laughter, and maybe a bed if you ask nicely. Sometimes they ask how old the tavern is, who built it, why it feels the way it does. The new innkeeper just grins. "It's always been here," he says, "and it always will." The scholars will come back someday, trying to measure its age, to trace its beams, to name the century it was born. But the truth will always be simpler than that. The tavern isn't a building, not really. It's a feeling, a kind of refuge that people carry forward, generation to generation. Somewhere out there, the first snow of a new winter is falling again, and somewhere inside, a candle flickers, laughter rings out, and the door creaks open for another traveler, tired, hungry, looking for warmth. And, as always, the tavern welcomes them home. Centuries pass like quiet footsteps, fading down a long hallway. The world outside the old tavern changes in ways no medieval dreamer could have imagined. Kings fall, empires rise, roads that once carried horses now hum with wheels and iron. Villages swell into towns, towns into cities, and cities into something larger, stranger, but the heartbeat that began in those smoky wooden walls never quite stops. The tavern stands a while longer, its roof patched, its walls rebuilt, its name changed once or twice. The Crown's Rest, then the Green Oak, then the Traveller's Arms. But no matter what the sign says, the soul beneath it remains the same. By the 17th century, the candles have been replaced with lanterns. The ale brewed a little cleaner, the songs a little bawdier. Merchants now arrive in wagons instead of on foot, wearing coats trimmed in buttons and lace. The laughter sounds the same, though maybe even louder. You can almost imagine the old innkeeper smiling somewhere in the rafters, amused that people still find new ways to spill ale on his tables. By the 19th century, the tavern is nearly swallowed by progress. A new road is built just down the hill, and travelers start favoring the shiny new coaching in closer to the turnpike. But somehow, a few loyal locals keep the old place alive. Farmers, laborers, shepherds, their laughter keeps echoing through the timber frame, softer but steady. The world is moving faster now, but inside, time still drips at the same patient pace. A young writer stops by one rainy evening in the 1840s. He sits near the hearth, notebook open, ink smudged, listening to the locals' trade stories. He doesn't say much, just scribbles now and then, catching bits of conversation. Old Henry's ghost still haunts the well. Someone says, "Only when the moon's right." The writer smiles faintly. He'll later call this place the very pulse of English life. By the time electricity hums through the countryside, the old tavern has become a curiosity, ancient, creaky, out of fashion. The new owner doesn't change much. Maybe he's sentimental, or maybe he's just too poor to renovate. Either way, the walls still lean the same way. The floor still sighs under every step. The tourists who come in the summer say things like, "Imagine how it must have been back then." They don't realize in some small, stubborn way, it still is. There's still a fire in the hearth. There's still a barkeep, polishing mugs with the same tired patience. There's still a few regulars in the corner, arguing about the weather, about taxes, about who owes who for last week's round. The tools and clothes have changed, but the rhythm hasn't. It's the same melody, just played with different instruments. And maybe, if you stay late enough, when the last customer leaves and the lights go dim, you can almost hear it. Faint voices, half laughter, half memory. The creak of the stool where the jester once stood. The whisper of the old storyteller's voice blending with the wind in the chimney. The sound of mugs clinking in a toast no one remembers. The tavern doesn't really end. It just keeps becoming other taverns. Every pub, every roadside inn, every bar where someone leans over a drink to tell a story. They're all descendants of that first medieval warmth. The world outside might have screens and satellites now, but people still seek the same thing: light, company, and a story to end the night with. Even today, if you find yourself in an old European village, or tucked down some side street in a modern city, step inside one of those weathered places. You'll know it when you see it. The smell of wood and beer, the hum of quiet voices, the way time feels slower inside. Sit by the fire, order something warm, and listen. The ghosts will tell you everything you need to know. They'll tell you that once, long ago, when the world was darker and colder, people built a place to gather, not just to drink, but to remember what it meant to be human. They'll remind you that laughter has always been a kind of light, that even in centuries of war and winter, someone always kept the fire going. And maybe, just maybe, when the door creaks open and someone new steps in, wet from the rain, looking a little lost, you'll smile and nod, the way tavern keepers have done for 1,000 years. You'll make space at the table, pour a drink, ask where they've come from, because in the end, that's all a tavern ever really is. A promise that no matter how much the world changes, there will always be a place to sit down, warm your hands, and listen to the stories of strangers. The light flickers, the voices fade, and the old building exhales. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, the silence glows with memory. And somewhere, under centuries of laughter and song, the tavern's heart keeps beating, slow, steady, eternal.